The wind howled past the stone walls of Oakhaven Academy, sending chills down Seraphina Bellwether's spine as she hugged her faded backpack close. Dark brown braids framed her anxious face, barely hiding the worry lines etched around her hazel eyes. A petite figure, swallowed by a worn, oversized pea-coat, she tried to blend into the throngs of students surging through the arched gateway, hoping to become invisible until dismissal. Seraphina had been at Oakhaven only 2 terms, since her family left their quiet life in Maine for this bustling Pennsylvania town. Adjusting had been awful. Her shy nature and preference for solitude set her apart from the start. While other girls navigated the social circles, she sought comfort in the music room's farthest corner, surrounded by antique instruments and the quiet melodies only she could hear. Unbeknownst to them, beneath her gentle surface was years of rigorous training. Back in Maine, her grandmother, a retired park ranger, insisted she learn Aikido after a bear wandered too close to their cabin. Every afternoon for 5 years, she practiced holds, throws, and evasive techniques in their old barn. It became ingrained, a reflex so deep her body moved without her telling it to. Yet, here at Oakhaven, she kept it hidden, desperately trying to avoid any trouble. The first sign of trouble appeared in her 3rd week. She was walking through the crowded dining hall when a towering girl with perfectly styled jet-black hair and a designer jacket deliberately blocked her way. This was Isolde Sterling, head cheerleader and undisputed queen of the sophomore class. Her emerald eyes flashed coldly as she sneered down at her, flanked by her ever-present sidekicks, Brunhilde Vogel, a muscular hockey player with a shaved head and a constant frown, and Genevieve Moreau, a porcelain-skinned girl whose beauty was matched only by her biting sarcasm. "Watch it, peasant," Isolde hissed, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. When Seraphina mumbled an apology and tried to sidestep her, she moved again, cutting her off. I said, "Watch it. Are you deaf or just plain dense?" The dining hall hushed, everyone watching. Seraphina's face burned with shame as she finally squeezed past them, their mocking laughter echoing behind her as she fled to an empty table. That encounter set the tone for the next 2 terms at Oakhaven. The torment started subtly, but grew steadily worse. Isolde and her crew would accidentally knock into her in the corridors, sending her sheet music flying everywhere. They'd make cutting remarks about her clothes whenever she walked by, calling her grandma or the scarecrow's daughter. During art class, Brunhilde once smeared paint all over her easel before she could start, ruining her canvas and drawing sneers from the rest of the class. Through it all, Seraphina endured in silence. She told herself it would pass, that reacting would only make it worse. Her grandmother had taught her that violence was a last resort, only for when there was no other way to protect yourself. These were just words and pranks, she reasoned. She could ignore words. The music room became her refuge, especially the secluded practice room on the top floor, where she could disappear for hours. It was there, surrounded by sheet music and the soft glow of the setting sun, that she noticed Gideon Blackwood playing quietly at a nearby piano. He was tall and thin, with warm blue eyes behind round glasses, his sandy hair falling over his brow as he focused intently on the keys. Unlike the other students who seemed to always be performing for someone, Gideon seemed genuinely lost in the music. Over weeks, they began exchanging shy smiles and then quiet conversations about music and poetry. Gideon was thoughtful and kind, dreaming of playing in the Philharmonic. He treated Seraphina with a gentleness that was completely different from the daily cruelty she faced elsewhere. Slowly, a warm feeling started to grow between them. Their first real conversation happened on a foggy Wednesday evening when Gideon found her struggling with a complicated Chopin piece. He sat down beside her on the piano bench without asking, his presence calming and reassuring. "May I try to help?" he asked, his voice gentle and hesitant. "I've played this for years." As he guided her through the piece, Their fingers brushed lightly over the keys. A small shiver ran through Serafina, and she found herself looking forward to their evening meetings more and more. Gideon never asked about the bruises on her wrists or the way she flinched when people got too close. He simply accepted her as she was, making a small space of calm in her otherwise chaotic world. But even this safe haven couldn't stay secret forever. Isolde and her friends had noticed Gideon's frequent trips to the music room, and it didn't take them long to figure out why. The idea that the school's biggest nobody had found someone who cared about her gave them new ways to hurt her. The harassment escalated on a chilly November afternoon when Isolde cornered Gideon outside the auditorium. Serafina watched in dread from across the courtyard as Brunhilde shoved Gideon against the brick wall while Genevieve filmed it all on her phone. Isolde's voice carried clearly across the open space. "So, you're the freak's boyfriend now. What's wrong with you, Blackwood? Can't find a decent girl?" Gideon tried to get away, but Brunhilde grabbed his violin case, pulling him back. "We're not finished talking to you, bookworm." Serafina felt her muscles tighten, every instinct screaming at her to do something, but she forced herself to stay still, knowing that it would only make things worse for both of them. Gideon endured the taunts with quiet strength, refusing to react, even when Isolde knocked his glasses off his face and stomped on them. The following weeks brought a new level of torment to Serafina's life. Now they targeted Gideon as well, tripping him in the hallways, defacing his locker, and spreading rumors about their relationship. The cruelty was calculated and relentless, meant to cut them off from anyone who might help. The last straw came on a bitterly cold December morning. Serafina was walking to her first class when she felt a sharp tug at her backpack. Genevieve had grabbed the strap, a faded thing Serafina's grandmother made, and was pulling her backward with surprising force. "Look at this pathetic thing," Genevieve said to the growing crowd. "It's so old and worn, just like everything else about her." Isolde stepped up beside them, pulling out a pair of scissors from her purse. "Maybe we should just put it out of its misery." "Please, don't," Serafina whispered, but her voice was lost in the excited murmurs of the students forming a circle around them. She tried to pull away, but Genevieve's grip was like iron. "Hold still, peasant," Isolde said, holding the scissors to the strap of the backpack. "This is for your own good." The metal blades cut through the fabric with a sharp snick, and Serafina's backpack fell to the floor. The crowd roared with laughter as Isolde held up the severed strap like a trophy. Genevieve released her grip, and Serafina stumbled forward, her hand instinctively going to her backpack lying on the ground. But it was Gideon's reaction that broke her. He had pushed through the crowd and was kneeling beside her, his face white with anger and worry. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice shaking with emotion. "Oh, how touching," Isolde sneered. "The freaks are comforting each other." Something snapped inside Serafina as she watched Gideon's jaw tighten with anger. Here was someone who truly cared about her, someone kind and brave enough to stand by her side despite the cost. And these bullies were hurting him because of her. "Leave him alone," she said, her voice surprisingly firm as she stood up. Isolde laughed. "What did you say, peasant?" "I said leave him alone." Serafina's voice had a new edge, something cold and dangerous that made several students step back. "He hasn't done anything to you." "Neither have you, really," Isolde said with a shrug. "We just don't like you. Get over it." The crowd began to break up as the first bell rang, but Isolde wasn't done. She kicked Serafina's backpack across the floor, stomping on it with the same cruelty she'd shown Gideon's glasses. "See you around, freak," she said, walking away with her followers. Serafina knelt to pick up her ruined backpack, her hands trembling with fury. Gideon helped her gather the pieces, his touch gentle and patient. But when their eyes met, he saw something new in her face, a steeliness that hadn't been there before. "I'm so sorry," she said softly. "I'm so sorry they're doing this to you because of me." Don't apologize, Gideon said firmly. None of this is your fault. But Serafina knew it was time to stop being a victim. That afternoon, she skipped her last class and went straight home, claiming illness. In the privacy of her room, she pulled out the old Aikido gi she'd packed away when they moved to Pennsylvania. The worn mat her grandmother had given her years ago called to her like an old friend. For the first time in months, she let herself remember what it felt like to be strong. Her hands moved with familiar precision, each movement releasing a small bit of the rage that had built up inside her. She practiced throws she hadn't done in years, her body recalling the movements of combat. But this wasn't just about becoming a fighter. It was about taking back her dignity and protecting the person she cared about. Isolde and her friends had mistaken her silence for weakness, her restraint for helplessness. They were about to learn the truth. The next morning, Serafina dressed carefully, replacing her old backpack with a sturdier one. She walked through the halls with her head held high, her steps confident. Several students noticed the change, whispering about the new strength in her walk. Gideon met her at their usual table in the music room, relief on his face. "You seem different today," he said. "I feel different," Serafina admitted. "I'm done being afraid." "What are you going to do?" She looked into his kind blue eyes and felt her determination grow. "Whatever I have to." The confrontation came sooner than she expected. During lunch, Isolde and her crew cornered Gideon outside the dining hall, their intentions clear from the way they were acting. This time, Serafina was ready. She stepped up beside Gideon before they could touch him, her small size somehow commanding attention from the much larger students. "That's enough," she said, her voice sharp. Isolde looked surprised to see her. "Well, well." The freak finally grew a backbone. "I'm only going to say this once," Serafina said, her voice calm. "Stay away from him. Stay away from both of us." Brunhilde laughed. "Or what? You'll cry on us? Or I'll make you regret it." The simplicity of her threat seemed to amuse them. Genevieve pulled out her phone, eager to record what was about to happen. A crowd began to gather, sensing a fight. "You know what?" Isolde said, stepping closer. "I think we need to teach both of you a lesson about your place in this school." She reached for Gideon's shoulder, intending to shove him against the wall as she had before. But this time, Serafina moved. Her reaction was so fast that most people missed it. One moment Isolde was reaching for Gideon, the next she was stumbling backward with Serafina's hand on her wrist, twisting her arm behind her back. Isolde gasped in pain, her face turning red. "What the hell?" Brunhilde lunged forward, but Serafina was already moving again. She stepped to the side, grabbing Brunhilde's arm and using her own weight to throw her to the ground. Brunhilde landed hard, her breath knocked out of her. The crowd gasped in shock. This was not the shy girl they knew. This was someone else, someone dangerous. Genevieve screamed and ran forward, her nails aimed at Serafina's face. But Serafina caught her wrist and twisted, using Genevieve's own momentum to spin her around and push her firmly to the ground. Isolde had recovered enough to charge forward, her fists swinging. But Serafina was no longer the frightened girl who had been tormented for months. She was a trained fighter, and her body moved with precise skill. She ducked under Isolde's first punch and grabbed her arm, throwing her off balance. Isolde landed hard, her designer jacket covered in dirt. "You broke my arm," she screamed, her voice shrill. "I'm just getting started," Serafina replied, her voice quiet. Brunhilde had gotten back on her feet and was circling her, her earlier confidence gone, replaced by fear. "You're insane," she muttered. "No," Serafina said, her eyes locked on hers. "I'm just done being your victim." Brunhilde rushed her again, trying to grab her. But Serafina stepped aside and tripped her, sending her sprawling across the floor. Isolde, still clutching her arm, looked around for help, but the crowd of students just stared, their phones recording everything. She had ruled this school through fear, but now she was the one who was afraid. "This isn't over," she spat, backing away. "Yes, it is," Serafina said, "but not because you say so, because I say so." She moved toward her, her training clear in every step. Isolde threw a punch, but she caught her wrist and twisted sharply, sending her to her knees. For a moment she stood over her, her hand raised to strike the blow that would end Isolde's reign of terror. The crowd held its breath, waiting to see if she would cross that line. But then Gideon's voice cut through the silence. "Serafina, that's enough. You've won." She looked at him, seeing the worry in his eyes, and felt the rage begin to fade. Isolde knelt before her, defeated, her followers scattered. The power was hers now. Slowly, she lowered her hand. "Get up," she said quietly. Isolde struggled to her feet, her face a mess of pain and humiliation. Dirt covered her uniform, and her hair was a mess. "I could have hurt you worse," Serafina said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room. "I could have done to you what you've been doing to us. But I'm not like you." She turned to the students, many of whom had watched the bullying without doing anything. "This is what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. When you think that being quiet means being helpless." Isolde opened her mouth to say something, but she cut her off with a look. "We're done here," she said. "Don't make me say it again." As the crowd began to leave, Gideon approached her. "Are you okay?" he asked. Serafina looked at her hands, surprised to find them steady. "I think I am." "Where did you learn to fight like that?" She smiled. "Maine. My grandmother taught me how to protect myself." "Why didn't you do this sooner?" "Because I didn't want to become like them," she said, watching Isolde and her friends walk away. "I still don't." The days that followed changed Oakhaven. Word of the fight spread quickly, and students who had ignored Serafina now treated her with respect. Isolde and her friends gave her a wide berth. More importantly, the culture of cruelty began to change. Other students found their voices, inspired by Serafina's example. The halls became safer. Isolde herself seemed different. The arrogance that had defined her was gone. She moved quietly now, her eyes downcast. 2 weeks later, she came to Serafina at her locker. Serafina tensed, but Isolde's body language showed no threat. "I want to apologize," she said quietly. Serafina studied her face, looking for deception, but all she saw was a girl who had been forced to face what she had done. "For what?" she asked. "For everything. For making your life awful, for going after Gideon, for being—" She struggled with the words. "For being the kind of person who would do that to someone." "Why?" Isolde was quiet. "Because I could, I guess. Because it made me feel powerful, because I thought that was what being strong meant. And now? Now I know the difference between being strong and being a bully," she said. "What you did that day, standing up for someone you cared about, protecting yourself without being cruel, that's real strength." Serafina felt no joy in her defeat, only sadness. "I accept your apology," she said, "but apologizing to me isn't enough. You need to apologize to everyone you've hurt." Isolde nodded. "I will." As she walked away, Serafina felt a chapter closing. The quiet girl who had arrived at Oakhaven was gone, replaced by someone who knew her worth and wasn't afraid to defend it. Gideon came to her side, as he had every day since the fight. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Different," she said. "Stronger, but not in the way I expected." "What do you mean?" "I thought being strong meant being able to fight," she said. "But it's more than that. It's knowing when to fight and when to walk away. It's standing up for yourself without becoming cruel." Gideon smiled and took her hand. "I'm proud of you." "For beating up Isolde? For showing mercy when you could have destroyed her? For being better than they were?" As they walked down the hallway, Serafina thought about what had happened. She had learned that silence was not peace, but surrender. That sometimes the only way to stop violence was to fight back. But most importantly, She had learned that true strength was not in hurting others, but in knowing when that strength should be used. The girl who had hidden in corners was gone. In her place was someone who understood that respect was earned through courage. She had found her voice, her strength, and her place. And in Gideon, she had found someone who saw her not as a victim, but as herself, complex and worthy of love. The transformation was complete, but the real work was just beginning. Building a better school, a better community, a better version of herself. These were challenges that would require courage. But for the first time since arriving at Oakhaven, Serafina felt ready for whatever came next.